toward the corral. Now that she's gone, I've got to go to him, Sarah told herself. She dashed out of her bedroom, leaving the door wide open. She hurried down the circular staircase, ran through the hallway, heading for the front door. "What's the big hurry?" She heard Eunice Price call to her from the parlor. Sarah had her hand on the doorknob as she saw her mother, Eunice Price, stumble into the hallway. "Please, Mother," Sarah answered. "I don't have time. I've got to talk to Peso." "Peso?" Eunice said. "I've told you 100 times to forget about him. He's just a no-good womanizing gunman." This time, her words seemed to be a little more slurred. "If you were smart, you would latch on to Andrew Wharton. That boy is a good catch. I think he really loves you." "You don't know, Mother. You don't know about anything. He's still in love with Kitty Carlin." "I don't think so. She's a wanted outlaw now. He wouldn't want her. Aren't you forgetting that you cared for her brother Jeremy too? When he turned outlaw, you said you could never ever want him again." "That was different, Mother. That's me and Jeremy. Andrew still wants Kitty, not me. He only wants me because he couldn't have her. Well, I don't want him either. I want Peso, and I'm going to have him." Sarah pulled the door open and rushed out, leaving it standing open. Eunice ambled back into the parlor. Peso Martin was just riding away at a gallop on the black stallion as she stepped outside. Chapter 5. "Just who are you guys, anyways?" Dandy Jim Butler said. He was riding a black Mustang that the two men had provided him. They were a quarter mile out of town and riding at a fairly fast pace. The two men flanked him on each side. One man was short and stocky. The other was a bit taller and much thinner. They both still wore bandana masks over their faces. Neither man had said anything. "I mean," the dandy said, "I appreciate you guys getting me out of jail and all, but I'd really like to know if you're being friendly or do you have something else in mind?" Neither of the two men answered him. They just kept riding. Okay, Butler said, taking their silence as an answer. "I guess I can deal with that." A few minutes later, the two men, hot and tired of the bandanas on their face, pulled them down. The taller one had a flowing mustache and dark bristle over his cheeks. The shorter one was younger and almost clean-shaven, save for a 5 o'clock shadow that was beginning to appear. The trio left the trail and rode up into the hills, slowing their mounts to a careful walk over the rough terrain. Half an hour later, they crested a ridge and drew to a halt. Down below in a basin sat a dilapidated shack. Probably a deserted line cabin or old miner shack. Shorty said, "This is your new home for a while, feller." "You mind telling me what this is all about?" Butler asked. "Don't ask questions," the taller man said. "Just be glad you're out of jail." "Out of the frying pan, you mean? I just want to know if I'm in the fire now." "Nah, we're just going to nursemaid you a while," Shorty said. They rode down the embankment and rode up to the shack. They dismounted, tied the horses to a rotted post that was leaning half over, and went inside. It was a one-room shack. It was filthy with dust and dirt. Massive cobwebs hung from the ceiling. Obviously, this shack hadn't been used for a long, long time. Butler wiggled his nose with disdain. "Maid's day off?" he quipped. "Funny man," the taller man said. "Sit down," he ordered. Butler gazed about. There was no furniture, not even a crate that could be used for a chair. "Where?" "On the floor." "Where do you think?" Shorty said. "But it's dirty." "You hear that, Roof?" Shorty said. "Mr. Fancy Pants says it's dirty. Now ain't that just too bad?" They both laughed. Dandy Jim just stood there watching them laugh. After a moment, he decided to laugh too. His captors quickly took exception and suddenly ceased their laughter. Their faces turned grim, with anger in their eyes. Shorty drew his pistol and pushed it under Butler's chin. The dandy was still laughing. It took a moment for him to realize that something had changed. He suddenly stopped laughing and gulped as he gazed down the barrel of Shorty's Colt. "Now do as my brother Roof told you." Shorty growled between his stained, crooked teeth. I forgot," Jim said. "What did he say?" Shorty pulled the hammer of the pistol back. It clicked into place. "He said, 'Sit on the floor,'" Shorty shouted. Okay, I was just asking." He bent his knees and lowered himself to the floor. He could feel the grit on his palms as he placed them on the floor to seat himself. How disgusting it was. A few minutes later, Shorty and Roof rode away. Inside, lying on the floor, Dandy Jim Butler had been left trussed up like a chicken, awaiting a pot on Saturday night. "They're dead ringers for us," Jeremy Carlin whispered. The Wildcats were lying prone on the ground, hidden behind bushes above the dry wash below them. 5 riders had hidden themselves there and were resting, drinking, and laughing. "Not quite," Kitty said. "Look at that one that's supposed to be me. He's got a mustache." As she said it, the outlaw pulled the red-haired wig off his head. He was completely bald. "Damn," Arapaho said. "You think they was trying to make it look like we robbed the bank?" Cyclone looked at him with annoyance. He said nothing, just shook his head. "You're getting smarter every day," Chief Henry said sarcastically. "You really think so, Chief?" Rap beamed with pride. "Will you all just shut up?" Cy rasped. "You want them varmints to hear us." The bandit, wearing a gray slicker like Rap's, was gazing around as if he had heard something. Then, as if deciding he hadn't, he strode over to one of the standing horses and removed a whiskey bottle from the saddlebag. They waited in silence for a few minutes until Cyclone decided it was time to make a move. He motioned to the others. They had already had their instructions. Chief Henry and Rap would move east above the wash while Kitty and Jeremy went west. Cy would stay where he was. When the others were in place, he would start firing his rifle into the wash. The others would follow suit with their own rifles. It only took a few moments to be ready. Then, Cy opened fire, levering his weapon as fast as he could. Bullets kicking up dust and gravel around the outlaw's feet and filling hats full of holes. Whiskey bottles shattered and bullet-ridden canteens bounced around the encampment. Horses whinnied and stomped about wildly as bullets plowed into the ground close to their hooves. They fought at their tethers, and 2 of them managed to pull free and ran off down the wash. The outlaws were taken completely by surprise. The wash had them hemmed in, and they had little room to move. It took a moment to realize what was happening, and before they could claw for their own guns, more rifle fire came from both directions along the top of the wash. The man dressed like Chief Henry took a round in the meaty part of his thigh and fell over sideways, clutching at the wound. The man in the black duster took one in his shoulder. He fell to his knees, dropping his weapon. Quickly realizing the futility of their plight, the others tossed their guns down, raising their hands and pleading for a ceasefire. Cyclone stood up, his rifle still aimed into the wash. The outlaws recognized him immediately. They gazed left and right as the others appeared. "Since you made it look like we robbed the bank back there," Cyclone said, "it's only fitting that we get the money. Don't you all agree?" He expected no answer, and neither did he get one. "Now, if you'll all move away from your guns and horses and bunch up a little, we're coming down for a little visit, and you better have that bank money with you." After collecting the money and running off the rest of the bandits' horses, leaving the outlaws to their own devices for survival, and getting back to wherever they came from, the Wildcat gang rode off richer than when they had started the day. "Grandpa," Kitty said as they rode along, "don't you think it's strange those guys were just lazying around? You would have thought they would have been putting distance behind them before a posse could catch up to them. They just didn't seem to be worrying about that." "I've been thinking the same thing, girl," Cyclone said. "Something else has been bothering me too." "What's that?" "We ain't seen no hide nor hair of a posse neither." "What do you think that means?" "I think it means that there ain't none. Maybe this was a put-up stunt by Simon Price to blame us for another crime." I wouldn't put that past him either, Kitty said. But why let that money out of the bank? Probably figures on cheating his depositors, saying the money was stolen. But there's one thing certain. What's that, Grandpa? He's gonna know we got the money now. He'll want it back. Chapter 6. Stop pouting about it, Francis, Bud Gorman said. It happened. It's over. There are other jobs we can pull. I'm not pouting. I'm thinking. And don't call me Francis. He got up from his perch on a large boulder and started to pace nervously about. The four young men had picked a grassy knoll to stop and rest their horses. They were all barely out of their teens, but all four wore cartridge belts and brand new pearl-handled pistols. 3 of them wore 1 gun each, but the one called Francis wore 2 guns, and he seemed to be clearly the leader of the bunch. Bud's right, Pete Gibbons said. Just chill it. He was sitting in the shade of the big boulder with Bud Gorman and Garth Pearson. Chill it, Francis said, whirling about, anger on his apple-cheeked face. He stormed over and stood towering over his followers. You don't tell me to chill it. You don't tell me nothing. I tell you, I'm the boss around here, in case you fellas have forgotten. In which case, if any of you want to take my place, you know what you gotta do. He drummed his fingers on each pistol handle. I didn't mean nothing against you, Bud said. I was just saying it wasn't your fault that other gang horned in on us. It was just a bad break. Yeah, Garth said. The way they came at us, all we could do was run. We didn't run, Francis said. We retreated. There's a difference. Of course there is, Francis, Bud said. Garth didn't mean nothing about it. How many times? I gotta tell you guys, don't call me Francis, it's Frankie. He wiggled his 2 Colts in their holsters. It's Frankie the Kid. Sure it is, Bud said. I just forget sometimes. Been calling you Francis since we was schoolboys back in East Sedalia. Well, just remember, will you? Someday I'll be as famous as Billy the Kid, and nobody will remember this Francis business. Sure, Frankie, Bud placated, emphasizing Frankie. Frankie paced away a few steps, then turned and said, What we need is another job to pull. Maybe a bank or a train. Something big like that. Make a big haul fast. Make the name of Frankie the Kid something for people to talk about. A name to be feared and respected. You're talking dangerous stuff, Frankie, Pete interjected. Maybe we should stick to robbing stagecoaches for a while. At least until we actually do rob one. Nothing is too dangerous for Frankie the Kid and I do the thinking around here. He walked off, climbing to the ridge above them. He stood there a while, thinking. He gazed at the countryside below. Far off, pointed mountain peaks jagged into the still, clear blue sky. Rolling grassy hills spread out below, and far to the east he thought he saw movement. He squinted his eyes as if it helped to focus, but it took several minutes before he could make out what was down there. He could hardly believe it. Maybe today would not be the bust he had thought it turned out to be. He quickly turned and ran back to his companions. His morose mood was gone and replaced with excited elation. Fellas, he shouted as he ran back to them. Come up here. You ain't gonna believe this. The others quickly jumped to their feet, brushing off the seats of their breeches as they ran to meet their leader. As they came close, Frankie turned and ran back up to the ridge. You see what I see? He said as his friends joined him. Just a bunch of riders, Pete said, failing to see the significance. Not just a bunch of riders, Frankie said. 5 riders. So, Pete said. So, how many riders beat us out of that stage this morning? Pete's eyes shifted back and forth, trying to remember. 5? He guessed. Look at those horses. The pinto, the gray. Look at their get-up. They're the ones. So what? Pete said. So they got the money off the stage, Garth filled in. Right, Frankie the Kid beamed. All we gotta do is take it back from them. Where the hell you been, woman? Simon Price practically screamed as Flo entered his office. His face was red with anger, and he had been pacing around in the cramped space of his office. "Where you told me to be. I went to see Peso." "I know that," Simon blustered, nervously rubbing his bald spot. "His men were here over an hour ago and broke that gambler out. Where have you been all this time?" "Well, I was talking to Peso for a while," she started to say, but Price cut her off. "Talking? Is that what you call it? Talking?" "Yes, talking," Flo said emphatically. "What else are you insinuating?" "You know what else," Simon growled. "Oh, Simon," Flo said, spreading a broad smile across her face. "How could you think such a thing? You know I'm your girl. Besides, Peso Martin is too young for me. You know I like a mature man." "A mature man with money, you mean?" "Oh, Simon, don't be like that." She sidled up close to him and put her fingers on his cheek. The banker seemed to melt at her touch. He sighed and touched her hand. "I'm sorry, Flo," he apologized. "I just couldn't stand it if you were to cheat on me." "You don't ever have to worry about that, my love." She pressed closer and kissed him on the lips. When she drew back and looked into his face, she saw coldness there. "I hope not," he said. "I'd kill you before I'd ever let you go." "Oh, Simon," she said. "You don't really mean that." The soothing tone of her voice belied the shudder that crept down her spine. She knew he absolutely meant it. And he was capable of it too. She kissed him again and let her arms encircle his neck. His arms came up around her and he pulled her close. When she pulled away, he seemed to be blushing. "No," he said quietly. "I really don't." But he did. As she slid from his arms, Simon felt himself brushing something from the back of Flo's shoulder. "What's this?" he said as he pulled his hand away. Several strands of straw were caught in his fingers. He glowered at Flo. "Oh, I must have brushed up against some bales of straw when I was looking for Peso," she said glibly. Simon shifted his gaze from the straw to Flo. "Yeah, right," he thought to himself. Chapter 7. The light was blinding. Gentleman Jim Butler tried to roll away from it, but his circulation had been cut off by the rope that bound him, and he couldn't will his muscles to move. He clenched his eyes against the burning light. He had lain so long in the dark without even a glimmer of light from an open crack that the sudden return of light was blinding pain. The cabin door had swung open, creaking on rusty hinges. The late afternoon sun, moving along its arc toward the horizon, beamed its rays directly through the doorway and shining on the trussed-up dandy on the floor. The doorway was partially obscured by the shadow of a man, breaking the beams around him and forming a body halo. The angel of deliverance or the angel of death, Butler knew not. Which one? Again and again the gambler opened and shut his eyes, squinting out the painful light until gradually his vision began clear. The halo dispersed, and the shadow of the man backlighted by the sun became more distinct and defined. There was a pistol in the right hand of the shadowed man. He stepped forward, sheathing his weapon in its holster. He squatted before the trussed-up man on the floor. Jim Butler squinted again, then opened his eyes. Before him, in the dimness of the cabin's interior, he recognized the face of Marshal Matt Starr. Starr had left the posse and had ridden back to town as quickly as his horse could carry him. As he had ridden into town, he had seen Flo Baxter returning from wherever she had gone. She had left the rig and team standing in front of the livery and hustled across the street, heading straight toward the bank. Matt knew something must be up with that, be he didn't have time to find out about it or even wonder about it. He checked out the jail and found tracks where 3 horses had been standing in the alley. Tracks of 2 men leading into the jail and tracks of 3 men coming out. The men had ridden away, leaving a clear trail. It had bothered him that more care had not been taken to cover their trail. But then again, Perhaps they were amateurs at this game and were merely incompetent. Hopefully that would be the case, but he had had an uneasy feeling that the tracks were deliberately left clear, making it easy for him to follow. But why? If these were Blaze Turner's men, why would they want him to follow them? But if these were not Turner's men, who were they? And what use would they have for a tin horn gambler? Just friends, perhaps? Getting a buddy out of jail? Matt didn't really think so. He just couldn't imagine Dandy Jim Butler having any friends. Who could trust him? And more important, who would Dandy Jim trust? Fancy finding you here, Dandy, Matt chuckled. Just the man I wanted to see. Well, when you get over being so glad, how about you untie me and get me out of here? What's your hurry? Matt said. You're only going back to jail. My circulation has been cut off and it hurts like hell. Just untie me, will you? Well, let me think on it a while. Seems to me you should have stayed in jail where you belonged. Maybe you wouldn't have wound up in this fix you're in. Come on, Marshall, Butler pleaded. Would you please just get me out of these things? First of all, Matt said, suppose you tell me how you ended up like this. 2 men, the gambler said quickly through clenched teeth, wincing with pain. They broke me out of jail and brought me here. Who were they? I don't know. Just 2 guys. Why would 2 men you don't know break you out of jail? Hell, I don't know. They got me out. That's all I cared about. Too bad, Matt chided. Look where it got you. Don't preach me no sermons, Marshall. Just untie me. Promise to be a good boy and not run away? I haven't got any legs left to run away on. At least I can't feel them anymore. Matt started loosening the knots. They had been drawn very tight, and it was difficult to pick the knots apart. Hurry it up, will you? Butler whined. What's taking you so long? These knots are pretty tight. I'm working as fast as I can. He paused in his efforts. Well, anyways, as fast as I want to. Maybe while I'm working, you can tell me what really happened. I told you, Dandy Jim growled angrily. Can't you just cut the ropes? Do you have to picket them all day? Sorry, pal. I don't think I've got a knife. If you start talking, maybe I could find one. You son of a bitch. I can't tell you any more. I don't know why they broke me out. I don't know who they were. I don't know why they tied me up and left me here. I just don't know anything. You're telling me you're dumb, Dandy? I guess I am, Butler sighed in defeat. Well, I can believe that, Matt chuckled. Maybe you're telling the truth after all, Matt said after a moment of thought. He slipped a jackknife from his trouser pocket, opened it, and slashed through the bonds. Dandy Jim had been trussed up so long that his body seemed to be permanently bent into position. Matt pulled the man's legs out straight and rolled him over on his back. Jim groaned with pain. Then Matt went to work on rubbing the gambler's arms and wrists, trying to restore some semblance of circulation. Then he pulled the man's boots off and went to work on his feet and legs. I guess I should be thanking you, Dandy Jim said, as he finally sat comfortably on the floor. He was feeling much better now after the circulation had returned. He returned the canteen that Matt Starr had retrieved from his horse's saddle while Butler was recovering and still too numb to try to get away. But damn it, why did you have to torture me like that? Well, you know, Jim, you've caused me a lot of trouble tracking you down. Granted, the trail was easy. Much too easy, Matt mused, but it shifted my attention away from something else. I couldn't let you get off easy for that. It wasn't my fault, Jim protested. You could have stayed put in jail. You didn't have to run. Oh, yeah. What would you have done? I saw a chance and I took it. Stupid one, Matt said. Yeah, it was, Butler agreed. We got big trouble, boss, Peso Martin bellowed as he burst through the door into Simon Price's office unannounced. Price was sitting in the easy chair, and Flo was sitting on his lap, her arms around his neck. There was a smudge of lipstick on his cheek. What's the meaning of this? Price demanded, obviously annoyed by the interruption. Peso slammed the door shut behind him. The boys lost the money. Price practically dumped Flo on the floor as he jumped to his feet. Flo's hands busied themselves putting herself back intact. What do you mean they lost it? The real Wildcats, he said excitedly. Kitty Carlin, Cyclone, and the others jumped the boys and took the money. Just like that? Price demanded. They couldn't stop them? No, Peso said. The boys were ambushed and shot up. Nobody was killed, but a couple of the boys are going to be out of commission for a while. How did Kitty get wind of the bank job so fast, and how did they find our boys? I don't know, but they did somehow. Sometimes, I think there's something hoodoo about that bunch. Like they wasn't real or ghosts or something, Peso said. They're real, all right, Price said. They're not ghosts, but we can make them ghosts for real. Kitty Carlin's gone too far this time, and I want that money back. Harvey Trask just got back with the posse a little while ago, Price said. Go get him and some of our boys to form a new posse. This time, you'll be after the Wildcat gang for real. I don't want any of the townspeople in on this posse. I just want the money back and the Wildcats all dead. You got that? Yes, sir, boss, Peso answered. They said, what about Matt Starr? What about him? He's still out of town on a wild goose chase. By the time he gets back with that prisoner of his, he'll have to be hightailing it out of town pretty fast if he's going to go that trial of his on time. Besides, he'll never know there's been a change. He thinks the posse is after the Wildcats, and he's right. We are. No, I don't think we have to worry about Matt Starr. I don't know, boss, Peso said. I hope to hell you're right. Chapter 8. Looks like your pals forgot to leave you a horse, Matt Starr said with a chuckle. How many times do I have to tell you? They weren't my pals. I guess not, Matt acquiesced. I'd say they left you with a mighty big problem. How so? They were standing outside of the shack now, and Matt had just untied his horse, readying to mount. The sun was halfway behind the far horizon now. A cool breeze was beginning to blow in, and large dark clouds were forming overhead. You don't have a horse. Maybe you haven't noticed. Yeah, so what? You've got a horse. We can ride double. Now that poses a problem, Matt said. I can't trust you to ride up behind me. Now can I? So I ride up front? And let you have the comfy saddle? I don't think so. Dandy Jim stared at him quizzically. You're saying I walk and you ride? By golly, Jim, old boy, I really do think you're starting to catch on to things. It's a long way back to town. It'll take hours at walking speed. I thought you was in a hurry to get to Tucson. Besides, it looks like there's rain coming. At walking speed, we'll get caught in it for sure. We'll have time, Matt smiled. I passed a homesteader spread on the way up here. I noticed a couple of horses in a corral. I'm hoping to get the loan of one. We may have to stay there a while if it's raining too bad. He hoisted himself into the saddle, lifted the reins, and gazed down on his prisoner. Best we get started now. Lead off, James. Butler grimaced, shook his head, turned, and started walking. He didn't bother to glance back and see if his captor was following. He knew darned well he was, but it was still a ways before getting back to town. He would just wait for his chance to make a break. Looks like rain, the Cyclone Kid mused, gazing up at the gathering dark clouds overhead. He wasn't making an observation. He was merely saying something to get his granddaughter's attention. Kitty Carlin, riding her pinto, beside him, had not said a word for several miles. She seemed lost in thought, just staring at the trail before and beneath her, and unaware of anyone or anything around her. Even the steady clip-clop of horses' hooves on the hard-packed trail failed to stir her from her reverie. Cyclone knew what was bothering her, but he still wanted her to talk about it. Again, he tried to break her silence. You've been awful quiet, Kitty, he said. We've been riding a long time, and you haven't said a word for miles. It had been over an hour since leaving the bank robbers behind, and they had put several miles behind them. Although they had no intention of leaving the territory soon, it was comforting to know that if need be, they had a place to hide out, but it would be a considerable ride to get there, for they were still a long way from the New Mexico border and Pop Dawson's haven for outlaws called Robin's Roost. Why Pop had named it that, Cyclone never knew, and he never asked. Outlaws learned early that one man never pries into another man's business. It was an unwritten law. And even among outlaws, there were some laws that they all obeyed. Pop had ridden the outlaw trail 20 years ago. He was known then as Big Quint Dawson, and he had found a hideaway deep in the mountains. The law had never been able to find it, and Pop had managed to elude posses and lawmen for years. As the outlaw life often does, it imprisons a man just as securely as the strongest jail. Pop had built a small settlement there in the stronghold, and as the years passed and he ventured out less and less, he began to provide a home for other outlaws on the run. It was here that Cyclone, Kitty, and the rest of the gang would hide out when it was necessary to let things cool off for them. "You worried about prices, men?" Cyclone said, once again, trying to urge Kitty into conversation. He knew better than that. Kitty shook her head, still remaining silent. "No, I guess not," Cyclone said, almost as if he were talking to himself or no one at all. He answered the question himself. "Simon Price never worries you, but I'll bet you sure worry him aplenty." "Oh, Grandpa," she finally broke the silence. "Why does it have to be like this?" "Seems to me you made your choice." "I know, Grandpa, but what choice did I have? I couldn't let Simon Price get away with what he did to us. He's got to pay." "Seems to me you're paying a big price too, Kitty. This is no life for a pretty young girl like you. You should be having a home and family instead of riding the owl hoot trail, being chased down like a common criminal." They had had this conversation 100 times before. There was never any resolution. There could never be. "Maybe someday," Kitty said wistfully, "after I've gotten even with Price." "Just robbing him ain't gonna do it, girl. You know how I'd do it. Me and Rap would just ride in and shoot the miserable horny toad, and that'd be the end of it." "Yes, but then you'd be no better than him. And the end could be the end of rope for both of you." "No thanks, I'll just have to keep doing it my way." "Meanwhile, you're just going to eat your heart out over that young marshal. I know that's what you've been so gold-darned quiet over." "Oh, Grandpa, you know he'd put me in jail if he could." "Yeah, I know. That pup got a huge, misguided sense of duty. Nothing stands in the way of enforcing the law, even if it breaks his heart taking you in. But I guess that's a big reason you love that little whippersnapper. I don't think you'd want him if he were any other way." "My Grandpa, you sound as if you almost like Matt Starr," Kitty said. "Like him? He's a lawman. We're on opposite sides, but I'll tell you one thing. That puppy's all man. Got a lot of grit." Then he chuckled. "Kind of reminds me of myself." He hauled on the reins and drew to a halt. He raised his arm, palm up as signal for the rest behind them to follow suit. Rap Brown pulled up alongside. "What's up? Where are we stopping?" "Just noticing the trail up ahead. See how it cuts through that draw. Banks are high on both sides. Plenty of rock cover and the trail's mighty narrow. We'll have to ride through single file. Could be a good spot for an ambush." "You don't think the posse could have gotten ahead of us, do you, Cy?" He shook his head. "No, they gotta be a long ways behind, if they're there at all. But I did see some movement along our back trail, back a ways." "I noticed a couple of dust balls myself," Rap said. "Not enough to be a posse, and I only seen it once. Looked back a couple of times, didn't see it again, then figured it was nothing." "Maybe not," Cyclone said, "but I don't like the looks of the trail up ahead, neither." "You want me to check it out?" "No, I'll have Henry do it." "That blind bat? He wouldn't see anything? If there was something—" I know, Cyclone said. "But he is our scout. It'll hurt his feelings if don't let him do it." I'd rather hurt his feelings than get hurt myself, Arapaho griped. We ain't gonna get hurt, and I have faith in the old chief. After all, he's been my partner for years, and he ain't never let me down yet. You're just believing those dime novel stories they writ about you two, Rap said. Come on, Cy, none of that ever really happened. Now did it? Cyclone ignored him, turned in the saddle, and shouted, Chief, up here. Henry brought his horse up alongside. Cyclone said, check out the trail up through that draw. Make sure it's clear to ride through. You betch'em, Chief Henry said, and prodded his mount forward along the trail. Just speak plain, Rap called after him. We know you ain't no Injun. You're not still in that blasted medicine show. Jeremy rode forward, came abreast of the others. What's going on? Cy's having the chief scout out the trail ahead. But he's blind as a bat, Jeremy declared. Never mind, Cy said. He's a good man. I know that, Grandpa, Jeremy said. He just can't see anymore. Before Cyclone could retort, Chief Henry returned from the draw, pulled his horse up short and waved, motioning his friends to follow him. All clear, Cy said, and gigged his horse forward. The others followed suit. Chief Henry turned his mount as they approached and rode back into the draw. The others fell in behind, strung out in a single file. They rode on into the draw. The banks on both sides hemmed them in as they traveled deeper into the shadowy chasm. They were completely inside when it happened. Gunshots rang out in the close quarters. Bullets kicked up dust around their horses' hooves, and the animals skittered in panic, thrashing about, whinnying shrilly. The riders, taken by surprise, first had to deal with the frightened horses, trying to bring them under control. This delayed their attention to grasping for their weapons. Rap and Cy were the first to bring their mounts under some control and were reaching for their guns when a voice rang out. Hold it right there. Don't go for your guns or you're all dead. On each side of the trail, high on each bank, two young men stood spread-legged, guns in hand and pointing at the riders below. The two on the right bank each held one pistol. On the left bank, one of them held one gun. He stood a little behind the one before him. This one had a fancy two-holster rig and held two pistols, one in each hand. This one was clearly the boss. He had been the one to shout the order. Get your hands up, he ordered. Yep, he was the boss all right, Cyclone told himself. Young whippersnapper. What in hell did he think he was doing? Cy let his pistol slide back into the holster and raised his hands high, still holding the reins. He motioned to the others to follow suit. Just what is it you fellas want from us? Cyclone said calmly. I don't recollect ever doing you men, he refrained from saying boys. No harm. Shut up, old man, the two-gun bandit ordered. You've done plenty. Now it's our turn. And just in case you're too stupid to know it, we're robbing you. So just throw down your weapons. Carefully. Don't make any sudden moves. Cyclone tossed his pistol into the dust. Do like he says, he instructed the others. They griped about it, but followed the old man's order. Well, I'm afraid you're barking up the wrong tree there, feller. We ain't got nothing worth taking, Cyclone said to the bandit leader. Don't give me that old man, Frankie said. We know what you got. I got aches and pains, son. When you get to be my age, you'll be welcome to them. But if I was you, I wouldn't want to hurry that along none. Shut your pie hole, old man. You're wasting my time. Just give us the loot, and we'll be on our way. No one will get hurt. I'm sorry, but I don't know what loot you're talking about. I'm getting impatient and mighty mad, old man. Frankie tried to make it sound like a snarl, but it came off a little high-pitched. We want that loot you took off the stage. Off the stage? Cy exclaimed. Why, there weren't. Wait a minute. Are you telling me you're the fellas we run off that was trying to rob the stage this morning? We were after the stage, all right, but you didn't run us off. We just changed our minds. Frankie was indignant. Sure, Cyclone said. I could see that, and I'm sure glad you did. Once we messed into the fray, I could see we made a big mistake. I could see you were a dangerous lot. Boy, we was relieved when you fellas rode away and left us alone." "What are you saying, Si?" Rap interrupted. We was scared, Rap. That's what I'm saying." Cyclone cut him off sharply before he could make matters worse. Rap looked confused, thought about it a moment. "We was?" he mumbled. "Sure we was. Don't you know who these fellas are?" "No. They're mighty dangerous fellas, that's who. Recognize them right off." Frankie seemed a bit confused. How could anyone know who he was? Maybe someone in a town somewhere had seen him, believed his brag, and told others about him. How this old man had heard about him was not important. He felt flattered and hoped his friends were impressed. "That's right. I'm real dangerous." He emphasized I. No mention of we to include his friends. "I'm Frankie the Kid." He boasted as if that would mean something. "You hear, Rap," Si said. "He's Frankie the Kid, you've heard of him." Who the hell was Frankie the Kid? "Really?" Rap said, sounding a bit awed. Then said indignantly, "Of course I heard of him. Killed all those men up in Arizona?" He thought a moment, his eyes pinching together. "I thought that sheriff, Pat Garrett, shot him some time back." "No, you idiot," Si said. "That was Billy the Kid. This here's Frankie the Kid. He's 10 times worse than Billy ever was." "You know that?" "Of course I do," Rap said, straightening in the saddle, looking proud of his knowledge. "Now, Mr. Kid," Si said, "we don't got no quarrel with you, and if you just let us go, we won't be no more bother to you. We really is sorry about breaking up that holdup this morning." "Then just hand over the loot and you can go," Frankie said. "Well, you see, Mr. Frankie the Kid, it's like this. We didn't get nothing off that stage." "Don't give me that, old man," Frankie said, irritated. "It's true, son," Cyclone said. "There weren't nothing on that stage. Looks like we was both fooled." "If there wasn't any loot," Frankie said, "what's in those saddlebags you got hanging on your horse's neck?" "Just the usual things you need on the trail." "How come you got another set of saddlebags behind your saddle?" "I'm an old man," Si said. "I need a lot of stuff. Medicine and such. Got me a terrible touch of rheumatize." "Well then, I think I can use your medicine too. Just drop those bags on the ground and you can all ride away." "All right, Mr. Kid," Si said, lifting the saddlebags from his horse's neck and dropping them to the ground. His horse shied a bit as the bags thudded close to his hooves. "Now back your horses away from the bags," Frankie ordered. The riders did so, and Frankie nodded to the 2 outlaws on the other bank. "Bud, Garth, you 2 go down there and check those bags," he ordered. Giving orders was fun. His chest puffed out proudly. The 2 bandits nodded back, then descended the bank. It was steep and gravelly. They half slid to the bottom, but managed to keep control of the weapons in their hands and their eyes on their captors. When they reached the bottom, Bud held his gun on the captives while Garth lifted the saddlebags off the ground. He was just starting to open them when a voice rang out from above. "Don't anyone move," the voice ordered. Chapter 9. Kitty's heart leaped in her chest, and she could feel it beat faster as she recognized the owner of the voice. Her head bolted upward, and she saw him standing on the rim of the bank just behind the 2 bandits. It was Matt Starr. He stood spread-legged just behind the outlaw that had been backing up Frankie the Kid. His pistol was firmly in his grasp, and the muzzle was pressed deeply into the outlaw's back. The dandy she had seen Matt with earlier was standing beside them. Frankie the Kid half turned in surprise, 2 guns still in hands, but a bit lowered in semi-submission. "Drop it," Matt ordered the Kid. "Your friend here will get it no matter who shoots first." "Then you get it?" Pete Gibbons had already dropped his gun. "You down there," Matt shouted to Bud and Garth. "Ditch your guns too." They complied quickly. Garth also dropped the saddlebags. Suddenly, Frankie the Kid no longer felt brave and tough. His knees were shaking. His hands trembled and the guns felt very, very heavy. Oh, how he wished he was Francis from East Sedalia again. I said, "Drop it," Star repeated to Frankie. He pulled the gun out of Pete's back and reached around him. Frankie stared into the bore of the muzzle. Sweat dripped down his apple cheeks. He let his weapons fall from his fingers and he raised his hands. His arms felt so heavy. "Now get down there with your friends," the marshal said to Frankie. Then he shoved Pete Gibbons forward, nodded to the gambler to follow, and started down the bank. "What's going on here?" Matt Starr asked, directing it to Cyclone, as they all got their footing at the base of the bank and stepped into the trail. "These are the fellas that tried to hold up the stage this morning," Cyclone said. "They thought we robbed the stage. Didn't believe me when I told him there weren't nothing on that danged stage." "He's right there, boys," Matt said to his captives. "There wasn't anything to get. Looks like you were all fooled." "Then what's in those saddlebags?" Frankie blustered. "Yeah, Cy? What's in them?" Star asked wryly. He had a good idea what it was. "Like I told these young fellas here," Cyclone said. "Just things I need for the trail." "I'll bet," he glanced knowingly at Kitty. She regarded him haughtily. He was sure the saddlebags contained the bank loot, but did not want to let on to the bandits that there was something to be gotten here after all. He had enough to contend with, trying to get Dandy Jim Butler back to town and then on to Tucson. He had no time to deal with a bunch of punk kids trying to be outlaws. "Looks like you boys made a couple of big mistakes here today," the marshal said to the boys. "You gonna arrest us, Marshal?" Frankie asked. There was a bit of a quiver in his voice, and he didn't sound so tough anymore. "No," Star answered flatly. Frankie sighed deeply, tried not to show his knees were shaking. "Today's your lucky day, boys. I got other business to tend to, and I can't be bothered with the likes of you. So, I'm going to let you ride out. But I'm warning you to stay out of any more trouble. If I come across you again, you're all going to be in jail, or worse. You get my drift?" Frankie nodded, didn't look at his companions who were nodding too. "Now get out of here before I change my mind," Matt ordered. "Why, yes, sir," Frankie stammered. "Then what are you waiting for? Get moving." "You gonna let us have our guns back?" Frankie asked. "Just leave them where they are and get out of here." Matt brandished his pistol at them. "Now get," he fired, the bullet kicking up dust at Frankie's feet. Frankie jumped back, then took off running up the bank. The others took off and followed after. "Look at them run," Rap Brown said, smiling broadly. Then everyone broke out in laughter until the young outlaws disappeared out of sight beyond the bank. When they were gone, Matt said to Kitty, "You going to give back what you stole from me this morning?" He said, referring to Kitty's earlier greetings outside the stagecoach. He smiled. "No can do, Marshal," she said. "I'm afraid it's all spent." "I'm sure there's more where it came from," Matt suggested. "Maybe," she said coyly. "Maybe not. You want to search me, Marshal?" "Might not be a bad idea at that," Matt answered. "Oh, for Lordy's sake," Cyclone groaned. "You two gonna start that consarned nonsense again? Even you are, you might as well arrest us right now, Marshal. I can't take much more of this." "Well, now that you mention it, Cy," Matt said, becoming more serious and letting his attention drift away from Kitty. "I guess I should." "Well, you don't need to just 'cause I suggested it," Cy said. "You shouldn't have held the bank up," Matt sighed. He gazed up at Kitty. The smiles had disappeared from her face. "We didn't do it, Matt," she said. "Everyone in town says you did. They recognized you. Besides, I heard you say you were going to do it." "We were," Kitty started, but Cyclone cut her off. "You don't need to say nothing, girl. He ain't gonna believe us anyhow. The fact of the matter is, there is 5 of us, and only 1 of him. If he wants to take us in, he may not be long for this world." You going to shoot me, Cy? Matt asked. Cyclone glanced at Kitty. She shifted uneasily in the saddle. Then glancing back to Matt Starr, he said, "No, I'm not going to shoot you." He heard Kitty sigh with relief. Then he said, "Rap, you shoot him." "Huh?" Rap grunted. "What do you say?" "You can't hear any better than Henry can see, can you, Rap?" Jeremy put in. Grandpa said, "Shoot him." He smiled with amusement at Kitty. She grimaced and glared at him. "Really?" Rap said, wide-eyed. "Really?" Cy said. "Shoot him." "No, I meant really, I can't hear any better than Henry can see." "Oh, for Pete's sake," Cy moaned. "Looks like you've got to shoot me yourself, Cy," Matt mused. "You know I can't do that." He glanced at Kitty. She smiled. "See what I mean?" Cyclone said. "Besides, like I told you, we didn't rob that bank." "He's telling you the truth, Matt," Kitty said. "We were going to, but we were too late. Just as we got to town, the bank was already being robbed. The bandits were dressed like us with similar horses. They wanted us to be blamed for it." "That's right, Marshall," Rab put in. "We was already there when we got there. I saw us." "Now cut that out, Rap. I done told you." Cyclone was really irritated now. No, Cyclone," Matt interrupted. "Coming from Arapaho, that makes sense. I guess." "So, what's it gonna be, Law Dog?" Cyclone demanded. "You gonna try to take us? We gotta shoot you?" "Well, since you're putting it all into perspective, I guess. I'm in no position to arrest you this time. And as you heard me tell our young friends before, I have other business to attend to." He jerked a thumb toward Dandy Jim, who had been watching and listening with amusement. "Then you best be getting to it," Cyclone advised. "Well, you see, Cy, I've got a problem, and that's what brought us here in time to save your worthless hides from those boys." "Hell, you didn't save us from nothing. They was nothing but kids. Couldn't even wipe their own noses." "I don't know, Cy. They seemed mighty interested in those saddlebags." "Like I told you, there's nothing in there but trail things." "Then you wouldn't mind if I take a look?" "No, not unless you're figuring on arresting us. And if you are, I guess we're right back where we started from." "I swear to you, Matt," Kitty put in, "we didn't rob that bank." "That's the truth," Jeremy added. "That's right, Marshall," Chief Henry said. "They were made up to look like us, but it wasn't us." "How would you know?" Rab put in. "You're too blind to see anything." "Me got 'em good glasses," Chief said, affecting his Indian lingo and adjusting his half-inch thick glasses. "We don't need to rehash that all over again," Matt said. "Like I started to tell you about the problem that brought us here. We've only got one horse, and my friend here," he indicated Butler, "is a slow walker. At the rate we're going, we're never going to make it back to town before that rain starts." He glanced briefly at the darkening sky. "Those boys that held you up had tied their horses back in the brush on the other side of that bank. I thought maybe we could hitch a ride with them before we found out what they were up to. The fact of the matter is, we still need to hitch a ride with someone. You don't think we'd be dumb enough to ride into town with you, do you?" "No, Cy, I don't. But there is a homestead a few miles from here. If you could help us out getting us there, I'd be right obliged." "And why should I help you out? You cussed law dog." Matt smiled at Kitty. "There's a matter of stolen property. I may want to get back." "Oh, for Pete's sake," Cyclone groaned. Matt retrieved his horse from where he had tethered it on the other side of the trail and brought it alongside the Dandy. "Okay, Butler, you've got a horse for now." "You're giving me your horse? What are you going to ride?" "I'm riding double," Matt grinned, and stepped to the side of Kitty's Pinto. She kicked her left foot free of the stirrup so Matt could step in and swing up behind her. Butler frowned. "I thought you wanted to be all comfy in the saddle," he called after the lawman. "I do," Matt chuckled. "I do." Chapter 10. The dark clouds were hanging low when Peso Martin and Harvey Trask rode hell-bent for leather into the ranch yard. Sarah Price's heart leaped with excitement as she watched the big man ride in. She dashed from her window, out of the bedroom, ran down the stairs, and out the front door, leaving it wide open. The gathering cold air rushed in. What in the world is all the excitement? Eunice Price thought to herself as the sudden coolness aroused her from her semi-stupor. An uncorked half-empty bottle stood on the table next to her chair. She arose unsteadily on her feet and half staggered to the door. She knew enough to close it and shut out the rushing wind, but she was oblivious to the excitement outside. "What's going on, Peso?" Sarah asked as she ran toward him. He was still mounted, and his horse was still stomping about, kicking up dust. Peso was shouting, and men were running toward the corral with saddles. "Out of the way, girl," Peso shouted as Sarah came too close and was almost brushed back by the lurching horse. "You'll get hurt out here. Get back in the house." Sarah fell back a couple of steps. "What's happening?" she shouted again. Peso ignored her. He was busy shouting orders to the men. She tried to move closer again. Peso whirled his horse around and almost hit her again. "You stupid fool," he shouted. "I told you to get away from me." He whirled his horse again and rode to the other side of the ranch yard, waving to his men as they mounted saddled horses and raced after him. Sarah stood there for several moments, stunned at the way Peso had treated her. She watched the riders disappear into the distance and the gathering darkness. The clatter of galloping hooves drifted into silence. Lightning flashed in the dark sky, and thunder clapped in a menacing roar. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. The heavens opened up, and the dark clouds released torrential rain. The trail was hardly visible in the darkness, and with the pelting streams of rain beating into the eyes of the riders, it was a constant struggle to move the horses forward on the narrow, winding path that skirted the side of the hill. The trail was slippery with mud, and the horses' shoes failed to find solid footing. The rain had only been pouring for 10 minutes, but already the trail was slick, and the riders were soaked before they had managed to break out their slickers for protection. Matt Starr and Jim Butler had no slickers, but had shrugged themselves into dusters supplied by Cyclone and Arapaho. This helped a little, but was far from satisfactory. Jeremy had taken the lead, since his eyes were better than the older members of the gang. Kitty followed second. Matt hugged tight behind her, burying his face into the back of her neck and letting the brim of his hat fend off the raging rivulets. Chief Henry and Cyclone followed with Arapaho bringing up the rear. The rush of streaming water and continual thundering roared in their ears. No one tried to talk, for the noise was too loud. They would have to shout to be heard if at all possible. They just plodded on, heads down, trying to keep the rain from their eyes and trying to keep their mounts under control as they traversed the slippery terrain. With their concentration so acute and the noise of the storm so intense, it was no wonder they didn't hear the approaching wagon and team behind them on the trail. The driver, also preoccupied with the storm and maneuvering his team, didn't see the riders in front of him either. Until it was too late. Arapaho seemed to sense it, or maybe felt it, before he noticed. The team of horses was pulling abreast of him at a frenzied speed, pushing him and his gray to the side of the trail against the upper embankment. The gray screamed in terror as the wagon hub scraped against his underbelly, causing him to rear onto his hind legs, forelegs pawing at the rain-drenched air before him. He twisted on his hind legs in close quarters, slipping and sliding and falling to his haunches as the wagon cleared by. Rap clung to the reins and tried to grasp the saddle horn, but it was too slick. As the gray fell backward, Rap pitched from the saddle, landing flat on his back in the mud. It was far too sticky and mushy to allow him to roll away from the falling horse. He saw the big carcass dropping toward him. He covered his eyes with his arm as if it would shield him. There was nothing else he could do but wait for the tremendous weight to come crashing down on him. A moment, maybe two, and he realized it hadn't happened. He drew his arm away and peeked out into the driving rain. The old gray had slipped just enough to fall clear of his master, but was now thrashing about in the mud. Rap crawled away as fast as he could. Meanwhile, the driver of the team had realized that he had run someone down and there were more riders still ahead. He pulled sharply on the leathers, swerving the wagon to the outside edge of the trail. He barely brushed Cyclone as he swerved, and Cyclone managed to gig his horse forward and just out of the way of the oncoming team and wagon. He rear-ended Chief Henry and pushed him up against Dandy Jim Butler, who in turn slid into Kitty and Matt Starr. The wagon slewed to the side and slid off the trail. The front wheel sank deep above the hub into the soft mud just below the trail, and the entire front end tilted downward and sideways at a 45-degree angle. The horses bogged down in the mud, the outside horse slipping and falling on his side along the embankment. He thrashed in his traces, pulling his teammate toward the edge also. The horse shrieked with terror and thrashed about trying to regain footing. Cyclone, suddenly realizing what was happening, whirled his horse around on the narrow trail and pressed close to the inside horse. The horse's neck and head were swinging about wildly, and Cyclone tried repeatedly to get a grasp on the halter and kept missing it. About the third or fourth try, he managed to get his big gnarled fingers around the leather. He hung on tight. It was slippery with rainwater. Quickly, he backpedaled his mount, angling toward the higher bank above the trail, and pulled with all his might, making sure that the bit dug deeply into the horse's mouth, forcing him to come under control. The other riders up front had by now become aware of the situation and had turned back toward the disabled team and wagon. The wagon driver had jumped down from the wagon seat and was trying to crawl over the downed horse and tangled traces. He was screaming, but it only blurred into a haunting moan, lost in the rushing rain, cracking thunder, and shrieking of horses. Rap, already on foot, was the first to reach the screaming man. He pulled him back from the thrashing horses. The man struck out at him to drive him back, but Arapaho clamped his big hands around the man's arms and yanked him backward, practically pulling him off his feet. "Take it easy, feller," Rap shouted. "We're here to help." Whether the noise was too much for the man to hear him or he just didn't understand, Rap didn't know, but he thought he heard the man say something about a wife and baby. The others had gathered around now. Jeremy was helping Cyclone to hold the horse. Matt, Kitty, and Butler had all dismounted and were descending on the terrified man. Chief Henry remained in the saddle, shaking out a rope and looping it over the downed horse's neck, backpedaling and finally settling him under control as he lay on his belly. "My wife and baby fell off the wagon and went over the bank." The man was shouting it over and over, and even in the raging din, the wildcats finally understood. "We'll get them," Matt Starr shouted, hoping the man understood him. "Hold him, Rap," the lawman shouted. Rap nodded understanding and tightened his grip on the man, pulling him back onto the trail. Matt jumped over the lip of the trail. His boot heels dug into the mud, but he still slid most of the way down the bank, falling backwards and sliding on his back the rest of the way to the bottom of the ravine. Dandy Jim Butler was right behind him, and they reached the bottom almost at the same time. There were large rocks and boulders strewn about the slope, but they managed to avoid colliding with any. The form lying in a heap at the foot of the ravine had not been so lucky. It had been stopped by a large boulder and was now wedged half sideways, backbone flat against the rock. Matt and Butler crawled over to the still form and was starting to pull the form free when Kitty came sliding down the bank. Somehow she had managed to keep upright all the way down. As the form was rolled completely over on her back, Kitty could see the bloody gash on the woman's forehead. Her eyes were closed, and she appeared either unconscious or dead. "Is she alive?" Kitty asked, shouting above the storm. She was afraid she already knew the answer, and she suddenly felt empty and alone. Dandy Jim lifted the woman's eyelids, one at a time, and let them drop closed. He bent over the woman, putting his face close to hers, and remained still for several seconds. He nodded his head up and down, affirming his assessment. Just barely. She's hurt bad, though. Kitty felt a bit of relief. Then she noticed that the woman's slicker was bulged out in front and beneath the rain-covered fabric. The woman's arms were clamped tightly around a small form wrapped in blankets. Then she remembered the man up on the trail shouting something about a baby. She pulled the slicker part way up, careful to keep the rain off the little bundle. As she pulled the blankets aside, she saw the round face of a baby. Pink booties jutted out beneath the blanket. A little girl. She had a mop of curly blonde hair. She was wide awake with big, round, blue eyes staring up at Kitty. She smiled into Kitty's face and kicked her little feet happily. With everything that had happened, the child seemed to be miraculously unscathed and unaware of its plight. Kitty reached in, pulled the baby free, and quickly tucked her up under her own slicker. The baby, suddenly being pulled from her position of comfort and being exposed briefly to the cold air and pounding rain, lost her playfulness and quickly screwed her little face up and began to cry. Kitty scrambled up the bank while Matt and Jim tended to the mother. The others, up on top, had ropes in place around the wagon and were backing their horses, pulling the rig up out of the mud and back onto the trail. The team had been settled and both horses were standing securely. They were a rain-drenched bunch by the time the wagon rolled into the yard of the small ranch house. The woman had been placed carefully in the bed of the wagon, and Kitty had accompanied her, trying to keep as much of the rain off the injured woman as much as possible. She still carried the baby beneath her own slicker. The baby had squirmed uneasily for the most part of the trip, and occasionally, when the roar of the storm settled, she could hear the poor child crying. Eventually, as she tried to comfort the baby with a tight grasp and a soothing rocking motion, the baby seemed to settle down and the crying stopped. Matt Starr had ridden Kitty's Pinto by himself, and when the riders and wagon rolled into the yard, he quickly dismounted and rushed to the rear of the wagon. Jeremy had already dismounted and was helping Kitty down from the wagon box. The woman's husband was unlocking the front door to the small one-story house that was only slightly more than a shack. Had the storm not been so intense, and had it not been so dark, it might have been seen as a cute little cottage, having been built with care and maintained well. Kitty scurried past the man, hustling her precious bundle inside to safety from the storm outside. By now, Dandy Jim Butler had joined Matt and Jeremy and were carrying the woman through the open door behind her. The woman's husband followed in quickly. It was dark inside. He searched out a kerosene lamp, lit it, and led the way into the single bedroom at the rear of the house. Long curtains draped from an overhead wooden pole were all that separated it from the living area. He pulled the curtains aside, and the three men carried the woman to the bed. They stripped off the woman's slicker, let it fall to the bare plank floor, pulled down the covers, and carefully placed her on the bed. "More light?" Dandy Jim demanded, as if taking charge. "I need more light." The woman's husband nodded, placing the lamp on a nightstand next to the bed. He turned and rushed to the other room and returned with another lit kerosene lamp. The room had been in deep shadows, but with the additional light, it seemed to come alive with a cheery golden glow, reflecting a well-cared-for abode. Bright-colored frilly curtains hung from each window on each side of the room. The feminine touch here was very evident. "Bring the light closer," Dandy Jim said, as he leaned over the woman and brushed a lock of brown hair away from her left eye, revealing the bloody gash on her forehead. Matt Starr stepped back out of the way, watching. To say he was surprised at Dandy Jim's behavior was beyond comprehension. He was seeing the gambler in an entirely different mode that he never would have thought possible. He actually seemed to be a caring man, and he seemed to know something about attending to an injured person. The woman was still unconscious. Eyes were closed. Butler examined them both again, placed his ear on her chest and listened. When straightened, he said, Heartbeat is a little faint, but it's regular and seems to be getting stronger. He examined her arms, felt of her rib cage, stomach, and abdomen. Said nothing. Pulled the covers all the way down and pulled both legs straight. The woman winced in her unconsciousness as he straightened her right leg. He examined it, feeling from the femur to the ankle. The ankle was reddish purple with broken blood vessels and was beginning to swell. I was afraid she had broken a leg, Jim said, but I think she just has a bad sprain. He reached under the woman and rolled her to her side. She groaned. Bring the light a little closer, he said. Her husband lowered the lamp. Butler slid the woman's dress up to reveal her bare back. He felt along the spine and outward into the muscles. She flinched as he touched the tender areas. There's no bruising of the flesh, but she has bad swelling around 3 vertebrae in the middle of her back. I don't know if anything is cracked or broken. We'll have to hope not. About the only thing I can do is try to get the swelling down. He let her roll flat on her back and stood up, staring down at her and seemingly deep in thought. Kitty had been in the living room holding the baby. She had taken off her slicker and hat, lit 2 more kerosene lamps. The baby had settled in her arms, and she stepped to the opening to the bedroom. She had been watching the gambler's attention to the baby's mother. She, too, was completely surprised by the man's actions. She glanced away from him and stared at Matt with shock and wonder in her eyes. Matt met her stare. He shrugged, indicating he was just as surprised and not knowing what to make of it. Will she be all right? The woman's husband asked. I don't know, Butler said grimly. I'll do what I can. We just have to hope. Are you a doctor or something? The man said. Butler didn't answer. He said, It's cold in here. You need to get a fire going. I need some cold water for the swelling. He dabbed a handkerchief against the gash on her brow and wiped the blood away. The bleeding had subsided substantially, but the wound needed immediate attention. How's the baby? Dandy Jim said, glancing toward Kitty. She seems to be okay, she said. She's been sick, the baby's father said. That's why we had gone into town. To see a doctor. She's had a bad cold. The doc gave us some medicine. Butler arose from the bedside and stepped toward Kitty. He held out his arms, and Kitty reluctantly handed the baby over to him. She suddenly felt an emptiness and a longing. The gambler cradled the baby gently in his arms. He ran his hand over the baby's forehead, felt around her neck and her chest. He lifted her higher so he could place his ear against her chest. When he looked up again, he said, She has fever, but not too bad. Her chest is very congested. We'll need buckets of hot water. We need to steam this place up. He handed the baby back to Kitty. She suddenly felt less empty. She clutched the baby tightly and held her close to her breast. Then to the baby's father, Butler said, You said you have some medicine? Yes, the man said, reaching into his pocket and retrieving a bottle of dark liquid. He gave her a dose of this tonic while we were in his office. Dandy Jim took the bottle, examined the label, and said, Good. It says every 4 hours, but in light of what's happened and with the cold and rain, I'd say we give her another dose now. It'll make her groggy, but it shouldn't hurt her any. Arapaho, Cyclone, and Chief Henry Two Owls had attended to the horses, stabling them in the barn, and were just stomping into the small house when Matt and the homesteader emerged from the bedroom. They had carried in bedrolls and saddlebags and dropped them in a heap on the floor in an empty corner. They were just starting to remove their slickers when Matt said, Chief, get us a fire going, will you? He indicated the fireplace at the back wall of the living room. Table and chairs were arranged in an eating area to the right of it near the end wall. Sure thing, Marshal, he said without affecting his faux Indian talk. There even seemed to be a bit of respect in his tone. He slid his slicker completely off and made his way to the fireplace. A supply of wood stood to the left. He bent to his knee and started placing some kindling in the open hearth. To the homesteader, Matt said, Show me where the buckets and water are. He headed for the door. Chapter 11. The little house was warm and cozy with the fire blazing away in the hearth. Green wood that had not fully dried out snapped from time to time, sending scattered sparks up the chimney. Buckets of water had been placed on the cook stove. A blazing fire raged inside. The water was boiling, and steam drifted throughout the cabin, filling it with thick humidity. Kitty sat in a rocker with the baby, next to the stove, where the baby could breathe the fresh, moist air. The baby was quiet and sleeping comfortably in Kitty's arms. Kitty leaned her head back against the high back of the rocking chair, closed her eyes, and drifted into a half-awake and half-asleep state. A contented glow had spread over her face as she rested, holding the precious bundle close to her. Cyclone, Matt Starr, and the homesteader were sitting at the kitchen table a few feet away from her. Matt gazed thoughtfully at Kitty and the baby. Kitty was a wanted outlaw, notorious for her deeds. It just wasn't right, Matt thought to himself. She belonged in a home with a husband and family of her own. He tried to push the thought from his mind, but couldn't. He knew he desperately wished he could be that husband and provide the home and family Kitty needed. But that was not to be. His duty was to bring her to justice, whether it be a jail sentence or a rope. He could not bear the thought of either. What was he to do? Just look the other way? Not do his duty? No. He was a lawman, sworn to justice. But if he was so dedicated to the cause, why was he here with these outlaws and not have them in tow? Jeremy, Arapaho, and Chief Henry had each placed a kitchen chair in front of the fireplace and were absorbing the heat up close and personal. Arapaho slouched in his chair, leaning back and stretching his long legs out in front of him. He had an open flask in his big hand. It was 2/3 full, having been full and uncorked just minutes ago. His lean cheeks sagged with contentment. Chief Henry was looking on with envy. His gaze was firmly fixed on the remaining golden liquid in the bottle. He licked his lips in hopeless anticipation of an unlikely proffer. "Looks good," Chief said soulfully. Rapp lowered the bottle from his lips and said, "You're not hinting that you want a swig of this, are you, Chief?" "Well, now that you mention it, I'd be right obliged." He reached for the bottle. Rapp pulled it back quickly, holding it tight against his chest. "Now just hold on there, Chief," he said. "As much as I'd like to give you a swaller of this, I can't." Chief's arms were still outstretched. "Why not? It sounded like a whine." "'Cause I can't give no fire water to an Injun. It's against the law." "You know I ain't no real Injun," Chief said. "You call yourself Chief Two Owls and you talk that Injun lingo. That makes you an Indian." "You know that's just an act. I put that stuff on." "I dunno. You're always speaking that Injun talk." "No, you're an Injun all right." He lifted his flask and took another swig, then another, and another. When he finally pulled the bottle away from his lips, he sighed loudly. "Ah, that's mighty fine stuff." Chief grimaced, slouched back in his chair, folding his arms and sulking. The homesteader at the table had identified himself to Matt Starr as Larry Madden. He was young, not quite 30. His wife's name was Eva, 4 years younger than he, and their 4-month-old baby was named Beth. He explained that he and his wife had been returning from town when the rain started. They had been in town to see the doctor, for little Beth had been sick of late, and they were worried. The doctor had said she had a cold, and had prescribed a tonic for her. They should give it to her every 4 hours daily, and watch carefully that she didn't develop pneumonia. When the rain started, he had feared that it could make the baby sicker. He panicked, and had hurried the team to get home as quickly as possible. He didn't see the riders on the trail ahead of him. It had been clouding up for some time this afternoon. "Why didn't you stay in town until the threat of rain was over?" Matt asked. "I thought I could beat it," Madden said. "We're new to this country out here. I guess I haven't developed a feel for change in the weather like you Western people do." "You from back east?" Matt asked. "Baltimore, Maryland." "What brings you out here?" I didn't like working in the big city. I saw an ad for good land out here, cheap. I thought maybe we could make a go of it. Have a new life, but it didn't turn out like that, did it? Matt finished. No, it didn't, Madden said. If it hadn't been so dark when we got here, you might have seen what this land is like. I saw it earlier, today, Matt said. I passed by here and saw horses in your corral. On my way back, I was in need of a horse, and I was on my way here to see if I could borrow one. Borrow? Madden stiffened upright in his chair. His eyes grew dark. Or steal. Matt grinned. Like I said, borrow. He pulled the now dried, borrowed duster open, revealing the badge pinned to his shirt. I'm Matt Starr, United States Deputy Marshal. I was bringing in a prisoner, and he was short a horse. Prisoner? He glanced around the room. Which one of these fellow is your man, Marshal? He was suddenly distressed. Immediately, Matt realized he had made a mistake. How could he tell the man that his prisoner was attending to his injured wife? He would obviously freak out if he told him. He glanced from Madden to Cyclone sitting across the table from him. He could see the amusement in the old outlaw's eyes. None, Matt almost stammered, but continued glibly. He got away from me earlier, today, before we met up with you. Cyclone chuckled. He was enjoying watching Matt Starr squirm. Madden noticed the chuckle and said, And these men, with you, they're your posse. Rapp, in the process of taking another swig, almost spit it out with a stifled laugh. Cyclone slapped the table and laughed. You got that figured out just right, son. We're his gold-derned posse. Matt glared at him, wishing he could strangle the old man right then. Ah, wishful thinking, he thought. We were talking about your land, Matt said, diverting the conversation back on track. You didn't know how bad the land was when you bought it then? No, like I said, I answered an ad. But when we got here, the land was nothing like it was described. You couldn't get your money back? No, the old skinflint said all sales were final. Just who is this old skinflint? Matt asked. Simon Price, that's who? Mr. Moneybags, banker himself. Kitty, from across the room, brought her head erect. Her eyes opened at the sound of Price's name. She was suddenly listening intently to the conversation. Matt noticed her sudden movement and interest. He wasn't surprised. We spent all the money we had on the land and getting out here, Madden said. We wanted to turn around and go back home, but we couldn't afford to. All we could do was try to work the land and see if we could scrape up enough to go home. We were prepared to abandon the land. It's no good anyways. I gather you aren't having any luck earning anything. No, we've just gotten in deeper. Price has given us loans for seed and tools, and now we're in so deep we can't pay it off. Price is taking the land back at the end of the month. We've got to go someplace, but I don't know where. Dandy Jim Butler emerged from the bedroom. He was unrolling the sleeves of his white shirt and was fastening the cuffs around his wrists. All conversation ceased, and everyone looked up expectantly at the gambler. She's awake and she seems to be fine, Butler said, answering the unsaid questions. Larry Madden jumped to his feet and rushed into the bedroom. Kitty, Dandy Jim said, Mrs. Madden is asking for her baby. It's feeding time. Will you take the baby to her? Sure, Kitty said quietly. She gazed down at the sleeping baby. She brushed her hair back from her brow and shook her gently. The baby squirmed, yawned, and seemed to stretch as much as possible within the constraints of her wrappings. Kitty carried the baby into the bedroom. Dandy Jim followed, said something to Larry Madden, and presently he emerged from the bedroom. Butler closed the curtain closed behind him. Matt Starr's eyes were fixed on the closed drape, as if he could still see the gambler and Kitty in there together. The baby was lying contented in Eva Madden's arms and had drifted back to sleep. She had had her fill, and medication had lulled her back to deep sleep. Her mother smiled lovingly at her little girl. Kitty, standing by the bed and gazing down at mother and baby, could not help but feel jealous. Oh, how she wished something like this for her life. Trying not to think about it, she turned to Dandy Jim. Mr. Madden asked you earlier if you were a doctor. You didn't answer him. Jim took a deep breath, blew it out, and said, No, I didn't, did I? He looked away. Well? Kitty asked. Well, what? Are you? Am I what? This evasiveness was going nowhere. A doctor. Are you a doctor or something? Something, Jim conceded. You certainly act like a doctor, Kitty pursued. A man who moves around a lot is bound to pick up a few tricks along the way, he admitted. You seem to have picked up a lot of tricks, Kitty said. Oh yes, lots of tricks. I've got them up my sleeve. In my hat? In my boots. I've got a whole bag of tricks. You sound like a man with a lot of regrets over those tricks. Oh, yes. He kept his eyes away from hers. From what I've seen here today, some of those tricks look pretty good. You just haven't seen them all, Dandy sighed. Somehow, I just can't believe you're as bad as you seem to think you are. Don't fool yourself, lady, Butler said flatly. I'm not just a pretty face. He smiled wryly. Just what did you do that has you in Matt's custody? Matt, is it? Dandy raised an eyebrow. Isn't he a marshal? And don't I get the impression that you're not exactly right with the law? It's complicated, Kitty said. Real complicated. With me too, Kitty. It's real complicated for me too. Why don't we just leave it at that? Chapter 12. The patch of early morning gray still outlined the rim of the distant horizon, with streaks of crimson ribbons sparsely creeping in, heralding a new day, and preceding the sun that was soon to rise above the mountains. Sinewy clouds from the previous night's storm were dissipating into torn shreds of wispy tissue. Fog was steaming off the ground below, casting an eerie glow across the valley floor. Bud Gorman awoke from his slumber. He still felt cold from the dampness, and his back ached from lying on the hard slab of stone beneath him. Frankie the Kid, Garth Pearson, Pete Gibbons, and Bud had spent the night beneath a rock outcropping. After being run off by Matt Starr, the foursome had waited long enough for the marshal and the other riders to ride away, so they could return and retrieve their guns. Believing that the gang of older outlaws had loot from the stagecoach robbery, they set out to follow, hoping to find an opportunity that would enable them to take the money for themselves. The rain had forced them to take refuge beneath a rock outcropping on a ridge behind the Madden homestead, totally unaware that they were so close to their quarry or that there were even any buildings about that they could have taken refuge in. Now, as Bud Gorman awoke, he could see the house, barn, and corral below. If only they had seen the structures during the night, they might have had more comfortable accommodations. Wait until Frankie, Garth, and Pete wakes up and sees that, Bud thought to himself. They'll have a fit. Oh well, them's the breaks. Suddenly, he jerked wide awake and sat up. There was movement down there. The front door of the small house opened. A man in a black broadcloth suit stepped out and gingerly closed the door slowly behind him. Wait a minute. Bud had seen this man before. He leaned over and shook the sleeping form next to him. Frankie, wake up! Frankie the Kid rolled to his side, groaning, his hands going to his eyes, blotting out the suddenness of what light there was. Come on, Frankie, come on, wake up. Bud continued to shake his leader by the shoulder. What do you want? Frankie groaned with a slur. Wake up, you gotta see this. See what? Frankie pushed himself to a half-sitting position. Pete and Garth were now stirring. Down there, Bud said, pointing toward the yard in front of the house. Isn't that the Jasper that Marshall had in handcuffs yesterday? Frankie's eyes were still blurry, but they sharpened quickly when he saw the man below. He jerked to a full sitting position, suddenly wide awake. His interest piqued. He crawled quickly to the edge of the rock floor. Pete and Garth, having heard, were clamoring after him. They were all wide awake now, and their attention was now fully on the scene below. "Yes, indeedy, it is," Frankie said with an anticipation much akin to licking his lips. "Now how do you suppose he got out of them cuffs and away from that marshal?" He said it more to himself than as a question for his compadres to answer. "And just look what he's got on his shoulder. If I ain't mistaken, those are the saddlebags that old man had draped over his horse's neck yesterday." "You think there's money in them?" Pete asked. "Of course there's money in them. It's the loot from the stage." The man below had entered the barn but left the door open. "How do you know that?" Garth put in. "How do I know that?" Frankie was irritated. "Because I'm Frankie the Kid. I'm the boss here and you're stupid. And I say he's got the money." "Doesn't do us any good," Bud said. "He's got it. We don't." "See what I just got through saying," Frankie said. "You're stupid. We're going to take it away from him." "You suppose that marshal and those other riders are around here?" Garth said. "If they was, that Jehu down there would be hurrying faster than what he is." "Think maybe they're inside the house?" Pete asked. "If they were, do you think they'd have let him walk out of there free as you please? No handcuffs and with the money besides." "I guess you're right," Pete murmured. "Of course I'm right. That's why I'm boss and you ain't." Then, before any of the gang could comment, Frankie rose higher with excitement. "Look here, he comes!" Dandy Jim Butler had emerged from the barn. He was leading the big gray horse they had seen one of the older outlaws riding the day before. The horse was saddled, and the saddlebags were tied securely behind the cantle. Butler climbed smoothly into the saddle, lifted the reins, and prodded the big gray forward with his heels. He let the horse walk slowly, steadily, and silently as possible until he was several yards away from the house. Then he kicked the animal into a full gallop and rode off into the rising sun. "Come on, boys," Frankie shouted, getting to his feet and kicking bedrolls aside. "We gotta get mounted fast before he gets too far away." "He's gone! He's gone!" Arapaho Brown shouted as he stomped around the small living room in his stocking feet. "The sumbitch is gone!" He kicked the Cyclone Kid in the ribs to wake him. "What in tarnation is going on?" Cyclone grumbled as he rolled over and sat up as he came awake. They had all spread their bedrolls on the living room floor in front of the fire the night before and had all settled down to a peaceful sleep in front of the fireplace. Matt Starr and Kitty had cuddled together in each other's arms. Larry Madden and Dandy Jim Butler had slept sitting up in chairs in Eva's bedroom. "The dandy's gone. That's what in tarnation is the matter," Rap bellowed. The others were awakening to the commotion and were starting to sit up in their bedrolls. "And he took the money with him," Rap ranted. "I knew we should have watched him closer." "But he was helping," Cy countered in Butler's defense. "He was helping all right," Rap blustered. "He helped himself to our money. That's what he did." "What money?" Matt Starr asked. He was sitting cross-legged facing Kitty. Kitty tried to look away from him. He grasped her by the arms and shook her. "What money?" he growled angrily. He knew damned well what money. She didn't answer, just stared at him. Matt turned to Cyclone, who was trying to push himself to his feet with little success. "It was the bank money, wasn't it, Cyclone?" Matt snarled angrily. Cyclone didn't answer. He merely glanced stubbornly at Matt and continued to push himself to his feet. He had rolled to all fours and seemed to be stuck there. "You told me you didn't rob the bank." Matt turned back to Kitty. He still held her arms and shook her again. "You lied to me again." His voice had risen to almost a shout. He shoved her backward, and she almost fell flat on her back on the floor, but her hands splayed out on the boards and held her halfway sitting up. "When am I going to learn that I can't ever trust you?" Matt rose angrily to his feet, staring down at her. His fists were clenched and down at his sides. His face flushed red with anger. Beside him, Cyclone was still on all fours trying to push himself up. Matt whirled toward him, slid his foot under the old man, lifting and half shoving him over. Cyclone rolled with a grunt onto his side, splayed out on the floor. "Aw, you shouldn't have done that," Arapaho said, rushing to the old man, reaching out and grasping both of the old outlaw's big gnarled hands. "He's an old man." "An old he-wolf," Matt said. "I should have known better," Kitty said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "How could I have ever thought we could be anything to each other? You're just another bullying law dog, picking on a helpless old man." "Helpless?" Matt fumed. "He's an outlaw and a bank robber." "Then so am I," Kitty said. "Yes, you are," Matt sighed. "And you're a liar to boot." Rap had managed to pull Cyclone to his feet. Cyclone said, "That'll be enough of that, Sonny." Matt turned to face the old man. Cyclone said, "You can call me anything you like, and you're probably right. But you got no call to badmouth my granddaughter. She may be an outlaw, but a liar to you she ain't. Any problem you got is with me, not her." "Don't bother, Grandpa," Kitty said. "He'll only believe what he wants to. He's just another stupid star toter." "I won't have you saying such things to him neither," Cyclone scolded. "You'll both be sorry for it." "Never," Kitty said acidly. "I mean every word, and I'll never take them back." She glared at Matt. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat, and he swallowed hard. He had to look away, not bearing to see the anger and hatred in Kitty's eyes. Larry Madden had come out of the bedroom. A paper was in his hand. "What's going on?" he asked. "Is this about the doctor?" "Doctor?" Matt blurted. "Hell, he's no doctor." "Not a doctor? How could that be? He's been treating my wife and daughter. They're doing fine. Of course, he's a doctor." "No, he's my prisoner," Matt declared. "At least he was my prisoner, and now he's gone." "Your prisoner? You said your prisoner got away. You mean you lied to me?" "So now who's the liar?" Kitty quipped. Matt glanced at Kitty with a shudder, then turned away to face Madden. "I didn't want to worry you. He seemed to be helping you, and that's all that seemed to matter at the time." "It is all that mattered," Madden said. "Even if you had told me he was your prisoner, I wouldn't have believed he was a bad man. A man that cared that much couldn't be bad." "I didn't say he was a bad man," Matt countered. "I said he was my prisoner." "That just makes no sense at all," Madden said. "Anyways, it doesn't make any difference now. He's gone. Left this." He pushed the paper in his hand toward the lawman. Matt took it and read it. "He says my wife and daughter are doing fine." Madden told him what was in the note while Matt was still reading it. "He left instructions for me to continue their care. He said he was sorry he had to leave like this. He said you could explain his reasons, Marshal. I guess you already have." "I've got to go after him," Matt said, handing the note back. Then he turned to Cyclone. "But now what am I going to do about you? Why'd you have to go rob that bank and make things difficult for me?" "You seem to be mighty confused, Sonny," Cyclone chuckled. "It ain't what you're going to do about us. It's what are we going to do about you?" "Huh?" Then he heard the metallic click of a hammer being drawn back and the cocking of a pistol. He suddenly understood. He didn't have to look at Kitty sitting on the floor. He knew she had taken one of his pistols from the gun belt he had left lying on the floor while they had slept. She pushed herself to her feet and faced him square. Tears were streaking down her face. She shoved the weapon forward in front of her, leveled at Star's broad chest. She held it with both hands, and the barrel wobbled under her tremble. "So, you're going to shoot me, Kitty?" There was a hint of a taunt in Matt's voice. "If I have to," she choked the words out. She shifted her stance, trying to steady herself. Somehow, Matt believed she would actually do it, if pushed. But he knew in his heart that she really didn't want to. "That may not be necessary, girl," Cyclone said. "He wants his prisoner back, and we want the money back. Seems to me we got pretty much the same goal in mind. We help each other track down the dandy. We get the money back and he can have his prisoner. We go our separate ways." Then to the lawman, What do I say, son? We got a deal? Seem like it's the best I can do. But once I get Butler to Tucson, I'll be back for you. We'll be long gone by then, Cyclone said. I'll find you. You can try. Maybe I ought to just shoot him now and get it over with, Kitty said. Her tears had stopped, and her face was rigid. There was resolve in her voice. Chapter 13. More than a dozen horses thundered down the main street.